in the world? What's going on? What's going on? All right, it's been a minute. We'll talk about that later. But I'm super excited about tonight's stream. So we're going to debunk the heliocentric model. And I don't say that flippantly. I mean, this is like literally a definitive falsification of the mainstream heliocentric model or any model that assumes the Earth to be moving in any way. And that's just like a fact. You know, you don't got to take my word for it. We're about to cover it. I've done my due diligence and even shopped it around, trying to talk to various professors, people with credentials, different connects I have, a lot of which like to stay off the record. They don't have a rebuttal. There is no rebuttal. And Alan's going to thoroughly break it down. So I'm excited that we have Alan from Space Audits on. His channel is in the description. Show him some love. Yeah, he has a lot of content on there that you should catch up to as well. And the implications of this are obviously incredibly significant. I know everyone likes to conflate shape and motion and stuff like that. But I always think that the first step is motion. But the implications being, of course, if the Earth's not moving, then it's in the center of the entire universe, which is wild. And if the Earth's in the center of the universe, how did they get there? It had to be put there. It's a special, unique position. And of course, we have domain on the Earth. So that would mean that we were very special and that the entire sky is basically a light show that revolves around us in a central position. So, you know, I know a lot of people kind of like their eyes gloss over when they hear some of this. They think it's like this nerdy in the weeds stuff, but you should just try to really pay attention. The implications are pretty massive. And I am not overstating what this presentation is about to demonstrate. So there's the intro. And like, look, dude, we welcome some type of rebuttal because we've been looking for one for a long time. All right, cool. That's the intro. Again, Alan's link is in the description. You should definitely go show him some love. And I'm pretty sure he'll cover it, but he's got a lot of resources and stuff for anything that he's saying. You can go fact check it yourself. Okay, cool. So I'll go ahead and bring him on. What up, brother?
Hola, amigo.
How's it going? It's been a minute.
It's been a while. I'm excited to talk about this one. The old telescope filled with water trick.
Yeah, man. And like before you start the presentation, it's kind of funny to think back. So we kind of realized how important this was a few years ago, right? And then I guess you have dug into it a little deeper, yeah?
Yeah, just taking it to completion piece by piece.
Nice. I'm excited. So if you have any questions about the topic, that's something that you don't understand, something you want me to ask him, something you want to ask Alan, tag him. If you super chat it, I'll read it. And yeah, we're gonna hand it over to Alan and let him kind of break it down with the presentation.
All right, cool. So, whenever you're ready.
There's that.
All right, so I put a link in the chat, but maybe we can put another one in there. This is a link to a GitHub page, which has another link to it, which is to the simulator, the presentation, and additional comments and stuff on it. So you can come here, and this works pretty good on your phone too. So you can come here, click this, and you'll have access to presentation, simulation, and a compilation of arguments and refutations. Okay, so to kind of start us off here, we're going to begin with the presentation, and then we'll get into the simulation and all that. So let me start this here. Okay, so this is a review of Airy's failure. And recently, if you guys haven't caught up or if you don't watch Dave's channel where he clips different conversations that occur on all the different Discords and whatnot, we were actually talking to a CERN physicist, our local CERN physicist resident, Franco, who gave some insight and clarification onto the conversion of the scale that Airy makes as we go through here. So there's actually going to be some corrections to some of the figures here, but the argument remains the same. It's just the path to how we get there is a little different. So anyway, here we go. So Malcolm Bodum, we're all familiar with him. He put out one of the first videos on the internet about Airy's failure, kind of points it out, what's up with it, and he gives a nice 5-minute breakdown with some visuals, kind of illustrating the issue with a telescope filled with water versus a telescope filled with air, because they give different results here. So to kind of give a historical recap here, to start us off in 1728, James Bradley had a zenith mount telescope, which is a telescope that just looks straight up. And the observatory that he built, there's a star that transits over it called Gamma Draconis. And when that star was supposed to be over zenith, he measured that it was off by a little bit. And so essentially taking how much he was off, that angle, that gives a relationship of 20 arc seconds. And then you could do some trig to establish a triangle where you get you could basically take the tangent of the speed of light, or I'm sorry, the tangent of the speed of Earth over the speed of light, and that gives you the 20 arc seconds. So the very important factor in this V over C relationship here is that the velocity of Earth is used to produce this angle relationship that's supposed to be measured in the sky. And so from that, they use this as proof of the model that heliocentrism is true. And now an extremely important and significant part of this is that a V over C relationship is what's called with respect to absolute space. So like you would take this velocity and it's with respect to the speed of light in its like own frame or whatever. So that's how all of classic physics works when they talk about motion being relative to the ether frame or a fixed ether. Like that's what they're talking about. They're talking about a mathematical relationship where they can take a velocity, make it relative to the speed of light, and get a ratio of the difference between the two to describe the velocity, essentially. So this is an extremely important measurement for their model. And it's the only time that they ever had a first order relationship where the V over the C is directly proportional to the 30 kilometers a second. And that proportionality is extremely significant, because if they were able to substantiate that under further testing, then it would give a lot of evidence towards their model likely being true. So after this measurement in 1728 came Arago in 1812, where he took a crystal prism, and I have a diagram here on another Prezi, which I'll bring up. So he took a zenith mount telescope, put a crystal prism in the center of the eyepiece, and when a star transited over the middle, he was looking for a color change in the frequency of light due to the refractive index and the velocity of Earth. And he was also looking for the angle of the star to change when it intersects with that crystal prism. And so he measured no deflection change and he measured no frequency change, so the color remained the same. And they concluded very generously, well, that must mean that the refractive index of a moving prism is the same as a stationary prism, which is, like I said, a very generous interpretation there. And the significance of that is, it requires an actual explanation, because by all purposes, if motion is with respect to absolute space, there should have been an angle change there if the Earth is in motion. So this is a contradictory measurement to the model. And so to explain this, another physicist at the time, who goes Fresnel, he proposed that there was ether entrained inside of the apparatus, inside of the telescope, and it was being dragged in such a way that it was canceling out the effect of the motion. And so they went with that for quite some time. That was like the go-to answer. That was Fresnel drag. And then the longitudinal version of that, where the light is moving parallel to the direction of motion, it's moving along with it. They actually measured Fresnel drag. So they took that they took a measurement of the speed of light changing having a proportionality change to the velocity of moving water, but then concluded that there should be no change in the refractive index of the prism or whatever. So it's kind of contradictory there. But they started to look at it in terms of not being able to measure a first order V over C relationship due to this ether dragging effect, and therefore everything was basically taking place as if the Earth is at rest. And then to later get into this, shortly after Fresnel's theory, Lorentz was working on a theory, and with Lorentz's theory, he was basically saying he was taking that drag term from the Fresnel drag and basically saying that it cancels out in the frame and it makes it appear as if it's stationary, and so they turned a lack of motion measurement into evidence for motion, because they were like, look, we're predicting a null for the motion, and therefore and then we get the null, and you don't really it's not really a good way to to interpret it. So let's see here. So here's Airy's measurement. So now we're going to get into the specifics of what Airy did, right? So we have this history of these measurements and them attempting to use the speed of light as a ratio to measure Earth's velocity through space, and they never get the measurement that they want, except for this one time for aberration in air. Now, between Arago and Airy, there was a gentleman named Professor Klinkerfues, a German physicist, who made a zenith mount telescope similar to what Bradley made. And what he did was he filled his telescope with water, with turpentine, and he said that when he measured the aberration angle, that the angle increased. Now, for a classic theory of no drag, they would predict that the angle should increase. And so let me take a look at that real quick. Let me show you guys that. So from another Prezi here, we have Foucault and Michelson in 1862, where they were doing experiments with a rotating mirror, a tube filled with water, and the angle of light as it gets reflected from the rotating mirror. So what they found, because there were two competing theories for light, and what they found was that when they ran this experiment, the angle increased when they spun their mirror. So when they introduced a velocity component, the angle increases. And the previous theory of emission, where light's like a little ballistic projectile, they predicted that the light would accelerate in the water, and therefore when it hits this rotating mirror, it's going to have a shorter distance traveled, and so the angle is going to be smaller. So because the angle got bigger, they falsified the previous theory. So they all kind of had an expectation for how light should behave based off of this experiment. And so when Klinkerfues did this experiment and said that he got the increased angle change, everyone was very excited. So that's when the Astronomer Royal at the time, Airy, ordered the construction of this apparatus here that we're looking at, which he was going to fill with water and repeat Professor Klinkerfues' experiment to see if he could confirm the results. Because if he could confirm them, that would be an extremely good evidence for their hypothesis being true. And so the significant part about this apparatus is that it's double spirit leveled, so one at the bottom, one at the top. And when you fill it with water, when you're looking through the eyepiece, there's a micrometer at the bottom here that is a cross section of a micrometer wire. And so to kind of put that in perspective, you can kind of think about this as each one of these threads is essentially the width of spider silk. So it's a very fine grid here. And he sets up this grid, this cross-section grid here, and he times how long it takes for a star to intersect with the midpoint of one of the wires, and the time it takes for it to traverse and intersect with another one, because the way that they have the sky and distance linked with angles, if you know the time and the angle, you can convert that into a distance. So to properly make sure that this device was calibrated such that he could interpret the distance of the wires as an arc in the sky, to relate those one to one together. That's what he did to calibrate this. So he's got this really finely tuned telescope here to take these zenith measurements with, and then and he's in addition to calibrating it in air, he also calibrates it in water. So he relates 1 arc of the sky, or 1 second of arc in the sky, so one little tiny sliver section of the sky, to 3.45 micrometers. So basically the width of spider silk. And then from that, he also converts the apparatus, each piece that the light has to travel through as it goes to the eyepiece for the observer. He takes the refractive index of that material and divides it so that he comes up with like an effective physical length for it to convert the scale between water and air, so he could look at, and interpret the measurements essentially to see how big the change was. So that's the important part there. Let me see where we're at on the slides here. So we go to 10. Okay. So we're looking at this this section here of experimental results of different theories and what they predict. And thanks to Franco, one of and then fixing the conversion scale, we can talk about what relativity actually predicts and all that stuff. So here we have aberration in air gives 20 arc seconds for the aberration angle that they say gives the 30 kilometers a second. And then when they add water, there's no change. So there's two possible implications here. And one is that the Earth is stationary and the starlight already comes in at an angle. And the other possible explanation was that there's a drag effect occurring that's canceling it out. And that drag term then gets applied to special relativity, because special relativity ends up falling back to the classical velocity composition, which is just the classic Fresnel drag essentially. So in any case, if they treat the Earth as stationary and they present their drag term, well, they predict the same angle as the geocentric position does. Now, the big difference here in what they predict versus what we predict is that they make is that to use aberration in air as proof of the model, that's an absolute velocity. V over c is absolute because it's with respect to absolute space. So to use that as like definitive proof that the Earth is in motion, that they're using absolute space. And then to do what they're doing for the relativistic transformation and the drag interpretation of it, they're saying that there's no absolute space and all motion is relative, and we're just going to treat the Earth as stationary for the explanation. Like that's how we're going to choose to analyze it. And so there's consequences to that, because you can only treat something stationary in kinematics, which which it talks about all the time. The difference between kinematics and dynamics is in kinematics, relative motion is always true. You can describe, am I moving towards you or are you moving towards me? Both are correct in kinematics. You don't care about any causal mechanism or which one's actually moving. Now, in dynamics, though, there has to be a consequence of the motion. So they say that there's no absolute space to deny the consequence of the motion, while also simultaneously using stellar aberration as a mutually exclusive proof. And to be completely consistent with their worldview, to have this angle match the same and have no change, they would essentially they should argue that stellar aberration isn't absolute proof of Earth's velocity, and that it's and that all motion is relative, and it could go either way. But because most people don't, everyone wants to believe that the Earth is in motion so badly that they just overlook that aspect of it, and they don't reconcile the contradiction there. And that's a big part of this theory for special relativity and applying physical explanations to reality, is that it's supposed to be philosophically and mathematically consistent. But the thing is that they're using a framework the entire Einstein framework for Lorentz transformations is just the original Lorentz framework, where it's with respect to an absolute frame and there's you know it's just that there's a drag term that cancels out the effect of the motion, whereas Einstein's interpretation is that there's no absolute space, and because of the drag term, there wouldn't be an expected motion, any expected motion. So that they constantly have to juggle between the two, and never really reconciling the difference is like why we're in the state we're in now, where they can't progress anywhere because they've got all this math, but their philosophical interpretation of it is bankrupt, essentially. What are your thoughts on that? What's it where they've removed ether from physics but kept the mathematical framework for the ether, and kind of just turned wavelength and frequency change into the contraction of the coordinate system itself?
Yeah, I mean, well, it starts even before that, where they attribute physical properties to space time itself, right? So like they philosophically hijack the ether from the beginning. Yeah, I would say like my simplest response would be like, of course they did that because they have to do that, because like all evidence is going to suggest like an actual medium with physical properties. And what they're where like like the rabbit hole that they fall down, right, is having to cook the books effectively. So you have to have something to attribute like physicality to in general, right? And then they're just going to do that through their math, because if you need to like, if your measurement is too long, you need to make it shorter, you need to shorten something, in really simple terms, you know. But
Yeah. Essentially, that's really what it is. They actually remove the physical properties from space and then just attribute them solely to the math that they're using to describe it. So if you
yeah,
think of like, if you see a graph, right? They're like, this graph, this graph is contracting and changing, where there's no like the light isn't changing or whatever. It's the graph. So they end up in this weird position where because of this denial and this like backwards physics, they can't really advance anywhere, and that's why we're like looking at they never reconcile anything with like dark matter or dark energy. These are all just terms to fill in the non-physical properties of space to make the coordinate system change accordingly to fit observations.
yeah, yeah. And like, just for those, I mean, in case like people don't know, right, like in the real simple terms of just like what this test is as simply put as possible, right? Like they claim stellar aberration is the displacement of stars over the course of the year, because they claim that the earth is moving through space. And so they attribute the change in the sky, the position of the stars in the sky, the angle at which they're viewed in the sky throughout the year, to us supposedly moving around the sun. And that gives us seasons, blah blah blah. So they take a telescope, they look at the star, they see it at a certain angle. If you add water to that telescope, as the star comes into the telescope and hits the water, I don't know if you guys can hear the thunder, but it's storming. It like slows down, right? So because the starlight is slowing down, then it's going to take longer to get through the telescope. And if the telescope is attached to an Earth that's moving, then it's going to move further underneath the light, because it's going to take longer, right? So like really, really simple. Like if you're running, and like a good analogy that I use for Airy's failure, which I know you've heard, is if you're just standing still and it's raining, then the rain is going to look like it's still, right? But if you start running through the rain, it's going to come in at an angle. And if you run faster, that angle is going to get steeper, right? And so like if the Earth were actually moving and the telescope was attached to it, and then the starlight came into the telescope filled with water, because it slows the starlight down, the angle of the starlight is going to change because the Earth's moved further underneath that light. So this is not like some woo-woo mathematical debate. It's like physically objective. It's like motion. It's a physical reality. And then what Alan is showing is that they can't even give you the mathematical prediction what was actually observed without doing all kinds of crazy mental gymnastics that is like logically bankrupt. It's actually worse than that, of course, right? But I won't jump all the way ahead. But just because there may be some new people here, that's the test, is like as simple as I can put it, right? Is the Earth the telescope was supposed to move underneath the starlight when they actually saw the angle. So you can predict that, right? If we're moving 30 kilometers per second or 66,600 miles per hour around the sun, which is what they claim, you can take that number, you can take the speed of light, quote unquote, the velocity of light, the distance that it's traveling through that telescope, you can get an angle. And whenever you add the water, which is going to slow the light down, you can just put that refractive index of the water into the equation. It's going to give you the angle, which will now be greater because it's taking longer to get through the telescope, but the Earth is still moving the same speed. And they cannot get that number to match what was actually observed, which is that the star effectively did the same thing in the empty telescope and the telescope filled with water, as though it was just sitting there not moving. It wouldn't matter how long it took the starlight to go through the telescope. It could take a year, and it wouldn't change if the Earth wasn't moving. So that's kind of like the synopsis of it, just in case people don't know.
Yeah, well said. And on the difference between the umbrella analogy, that's actually what Professor Klinkerfuse opened up with in his paper. He was like, there has to be a difference between real motion and apparent motion, and he actually says, irrespective of any ether theories, in terms of like drag and whatnot, because that was on the table at the time. He was like, irrespective of any of those, we know that if the motion's real, it's going to cause an angle shift. And he was referring to Michelson and Foucault's experiment where they had shown that the angle does increase. And so, yeah, if there was actually consequences to it, it should show up in this exact kind of measurement. And he actually went as far as to say that he measured that change, which is pretty wild, like as if no one was going to check it. Yes.
Yeah, that's crazy. And so basically Airy's like, okay, let's find out. This visualization is awesome right here to kind of give you an visualization.
Yeah, there's so in the simulator here, it relates basically what's going on, and you can see the difference between the telescope and air. They're like, oh, this is caused by Earth's motion, and then when they do this one, they're like, oh, we'll treat the Earth as stationary and say that the light's already coming in at an angle. Like, okay,
right?
I guess you could. I get it's like I don't know. It's just so crazy the freedom that they have, because they have 100% control of the narrative. Like, this is all presented through the lens of the Royal Society and their findings and whatnot. And so it's kind of like when the police investigate themselves and find no wrongdoing. It's like
like the IDF is not they're not terrorists because they investigated it.
Yeah, they're like, we gave ourselves permission to do this, but yeah, they just have like unlimited philosophical license to interpret, do whatever they need to make it fit. And you can really tell that when when people use the V over C absolute space in air, and then when it comes to water, they have to use no absolute space. They have to deny the thing that everything was already built upon, right? Because before any of this, it was, it's everything in classical physics is based upon an absolute reference frame. So like the idea of adding masses together is dependent on an absolute reference frame. Like you can't stack 15 pounds and 15 pounds together to get 30 pounds without an absolute reference frame.
Right.
So like the very backbone of dynamic predictions is also like inertia itself is dependent on an absolute reference frame. I mean, these are things that are not even in question in the mainstream, but when you try to apply an absolute reference frame to Earth's motion, they're like, no, we can't do that. And like they're kind of teetering around with maybe the CMB could be an absolute reference frame, but it's like, great, now all motion should be relative to it. Where's our 330 kilometer a second velocity reading? You don't have that either. So and then well, it's not like a real reference frame. Okay, it's just the fake one.
Yeah, I had a physicist trying to tell me that the other day, but I actually like him. I'm not gonna name drop him or anything, but yeah,
he's a good lad. But yeah, that's the exact kind of contradiction. As soon as they invoke a frame, just like, okay, so why isn't all motion relative to it?
Right, and then to kind of give a like another little piece of information there, right? Like, so obviously in the mainstream model, they claim that the Earth is tilted at 23.4 degrees, and that's why we view everything at that relative angle. So of course, if you it would just be relative. If you flip it around, the Earth's not moving. You have like a 23.4 degree angle off the elliptic plane, right? And so they're claiming that because we're like flying through space tilted, that we perceive it at that 23.4 degrees, which I won't even get into. The CMB extends out past that and shows that the 23.4 degrees isn't local, which actually falsifies the heliocentric model as well, and that's never been even rebutted. But beyond that, then if you just think, if I want people to kind of understand it, because what they do, they always like, normally the reason Airy's failure is the thing I chose to like do on the comeback stream is I think it's the most damning thing, because they do relativistic corrections and mental gymnastics, and normally they can get the solution, meaning like it's completely retarded, it doesn't make any sense, it defies physics, it's contradictory, it isn't actually viable, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But they can get the number. Right, they can find a way to get the number. Like with MMX, they find a way to get the number, kind of, right? I mean, they just kind of dismiss the friendship to error margin, but they can't even do that with this. They can't even get the number. They can't come up with a relativistic transformation to even get the solution to the actual measured value. We are well over a century out, right? So that's crazy.
Yeah, the best they could do is co-opt the geocentric position. Via the mechanism of denying absolute space, which is what the first aberration was based upon. So
they don't get to do that, right? Like that doesn't count. Like, well, yeah, I mean, yeah, they can get the number. The only way they can get the number, just so everyone understands, right? The only way that they can get the number that's actually measured is they have to treat the Earth like it's stationary in a rest frame. Literally, that's the only way. So what do you know? You know that the stationary Earth predicts the exact thing that's observed per usual, right? And then, of course, like, I'm pretty sure most of this audience is familiar with some of these basics, right? But of course, you have absolute space being from the Newtonian framework, which was accepted across the board for hundreds of years. You have Mach come along all this time later and be like, well, everyone overlooked something. Newton thought that the sun was the center of the whole universe, right? We didn't even... He was wrong. He didn't even realize how big the universe actually was. And so when you actually apply the entirety of the universe, you can have the Machian principle where the Earth could be stationary and there be a dynamic equivalence, blah, blah, blah. You have tests like this that then lead into MMX, and you have the relativistic correction, right? You have Einstein come in and save the day. Supposedly, I think he was just a front man, but it doesn't matter. And then he says space is not absolute and fixed, right? So that's like the historical context of it. So yeah, whatever. So then what do you even have to go off of at that point, right? Like you have nothing to measure against.
Yeah. You could only measure it against another arbitrarily moving frame that you're going to treat as stationary, and not acknowledge it as an absolute reference. Like, think about how crazy this is. The original Lorentz framework is with respect, like it's it's electromagnetic propagation with respect to the light medium. So the transformation and the thing that keeps the speed of light the same is making it relative to the light medium. And then what the observer is going to measure is going to be, the c plus or minus v or whatever. And then Einstein just took that same framework and was like, oh, actually the c plus or minus v is the contraction of the coordinate system itself, and the speed of light just remains constant through that. Because, like you said, if your measurement's too long, so to speak, you just change the distance of it, and look, and now it fits.
Yeah, exactly. And
so sorry, real quick.
Well, just last thing I'll say is like what I always find with the average person, right, is they just assume that like what we're saying can't be true, and there's smarter people that figured it out, and then relativity melts their mind, and they just kind of learn to say phrases like it's reference frame dependent or whatever. And so just to throw this out here, you do have basically all of these sources compiled, so everyone can fact check all the math, all the sources, all the primary sources, all the actual measurements, all the replications, even modern day replications, all of that, right?
Yes, sir. So in the GitHub here, there's a sources folder, project sources, that has all the PDFs that were used in here. And then for any sections that have like specific math relations and whatnot, there's a Google spreadsheet where the direct clips are taken out and put in the sources tab here. There's a data table for Airy's stuff, and then there's a spreadsheet for all the math that's used to build the presentation. And like I said, there is going to be a correction to the scale factor or whatever to accurately represent what special relativity predicts. Um, but other than that,
Awesome.
everything's all there.
Very cool.
Yeah. And then I just wanted to kind of touch back on something earlier. So I mentioned earlier about the. Let me see if I can find a diagram for it. Nice. You think your boy doesn't have a Fresnel drag diagram on deck? Obviously. All right. So this is extremely significant here. This was in 1851. Yeah, 1851. So remember, Arago had done that experiment with the crystal prism, and this gentleman Fresnel had hypothesized that it says here, Fresnel, on the basis of a model in which the density of the elastic ether in matter is proportional to the refractive index squared. So that's the drag term that they have. And then so in this setup, this is the longitudinal Fresnel drag. In this setup, sunlight was used. It hits a beam splitter. It goes through a tube that has flowing water that's going with or against the flow, depending on which section the split beam enters. And so the velocity of water, I think it was like 10 meters a second or something like that. And he measured a velocity shift of 44% of that velocity going with and 44% going against, totaling at 88% of the velocity of the water, affecting the speed of light. And so when the light recombined on the other end here, you see these fringe patterns. So the distance of that fringe pattern, if you were to get like a ruler out and measure it, the distance of that squared is proportional to the velocity that caused it. So that's the relationship that they established with light and fringe measurements. And so they knew how much velocity and how much fringe there should be to relate to that velocity when they made these measurements. And so with this particular experiment, this actually should have measured a velocity shift of 30 kilometers a second plus 10 meters a second added together, because the apparatus is moving with the Earth. And so I just wanted to give some context for that, because a later experiment was performed after they had kind of went with this drag effect, canceling it out and whatnot, even though they directly measured a velocity difference due to the velocity of the medium. Another experiment was done by a gentleman named Hoke right before Michelson and Morley, and he had his interferometer set up where one of the arms had water in it that was stationary, and the other arm had air. And so the fringe shift was supposed to, like the medium was supposed to carry the 30 kilometer velocity potential, and he didn't get a fringe shift change proportional to that. So he concluded that this was proof that the Earth was in motion, because they predicted that there would be no change, that there would be no measurement change for that. So let's see here. And so what this gentleman pointed out in my YouTube comments on this area, on a recent Airy's failure discussion that we were having with Franco, is that he says the whole discussion comes down to the fact that pre-relativity experiments of Fizeau and Airy can't be resolved in the sun frame. Fresnel drag gives the following addition formula, and this is also true in relativity. So like earlier when I said that relativity falls back to the classic Fresnel drag, because it has to be compatible with classic physics anyway, even though it's antithetical because it denies absolute space. But in any case, it falls back to that classic formula there. And so he's saying that it can't be resolved because basically they make the same prediction. But then he says, of course, one would expect to see Earth's contribution. In the Fizeau experiment, the situation is much worse because he was able to measure the interference due to the water flow velocity, but not Earth velocity. How was Fizeau able to measure a much smaller velocity of water flow, but not the larger velocity of Earth around the sun? And that's pretty profound when you think about it, because they, if this velocity component was real, they should have no problem replicating it with an interferometer. Like if James Bradley's measurement was related to Earth's motion at all, these interferometer experiments would have that proportional ratio. Like, it would be quote unquote set in stone essentially, because the wavelength proportionality is it's a measurable thing. That's what Doppler shift is. So should have been there.
Yeah. Yeah. For those that don't know, what is Franco's like background?
He is a physicist. He teaches at some university. I think he's like semi-retired now, and he did a couple of projects with CERN. I think he was part of one of the G2 measurements or whatever, like the muon.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I just wanted you guys to know, because you're just like, oh, I was talking to Franco. It's like
who's Franco?
Yeah. It's just like what you find is that the people that actually have credentials, they don't have a rebuttal to this. This is not like we are sitting over here in the corner of the internet misrepresenting their position, and then no one that actually understands it or is part of like the mainstream academia or has credentials or a relevant background, like takes it serious. That isn't the case, right? It's like, no, there legitimately is no answer. And am I tripping? I prefer not to even say his name on here, right? But like goofy little anti-flat earther guy, didn't they like try to debunk you presenting this and live time do the math, attempting to get the 20 and a half degrees or arc seconds?
Yeah, but they obviously didn't know about the conversion factor, and then because what Franco presented in his document is the internal angle analysis of it, but nobody measures that. You have to convert what it would be for the celestial arc, essentially. So like they arrived at our previous conclusion mathematically, but didn't like draw any conclusion from it, and they just concluded that special relativity was right, even though they didn't know what they were interpreting was they were incorrectly interpreting it and arrived at our conclusion, which should have led to the contradiction being obvious, but they still concluded that it was correct, and they ended up being right, because after you apply the conversion, what Franco is showing here, it does make the same prediction as the geocentric frame, but it's only at the cost of denying absolute space that they would have to assume is true for the V over C for aberration and air to hold.
Right. So the very like framework required to make the initial aberration argument, they have to trash it to try to defend the aberration full circle.
Yep. Yeah, and then you'll never get them to concede that aberration in air and water are relative and it's not mutually exclusive proof, even though they have to use two different frames to explain the same measurement.
And let's put that in really simple terms, right? Like they have to claim that the universe is different if the light goes through water or through air.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. Yeah, they have to say it operates on fundamentally different principles when you introduce the water. That's it, like, which is absurd. I mean, like the whole thing with Einstein. I want to show this real quick because, like, oops, this is the wrong thing. Why is it Zotero? Zotero. 205. Einstein on the electrode. How do I not have? Where's my local copy of Einstein's paper? Huh. Well, anyway, let me find this real quick. And
Which
then,
one? Which paper?
Just on the electrodynamics of moving bodies. I can't find it.
Special relativity.
Yeah.
Yeah. No worries. Take your time, man. I'm gonna read the super chats in this little interim.
Okay.
All right. Super chat. Shout out to you guys. If you have questions for Alan or one of us, go ahead and ask while we have him here. All right. Wits it, gets it. Thank you for the super chat. Let me see if. Yeah, here we go. All right. Daniel, thank you so much for the support. Shout out to people supporting on Kick as well. Very generous super chat, $200. Thank you, man. D Dexta 4435. Crazy generous. Thank you so much. Found your channel recently, been grinding all of your content. Seeking and speaking truth is life-changing. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I was actually thinking about this the other day because I've been away for so long. I'm like, dude, there is a pretty good amount of information on the channel though. So you can go through, relatively speaking, Skull and Globers, Middle Ground. That'll get you caught up pretty well. Geocentrism, you want to dive further into it, go to Ether Cosmology, go to Space Audits. Yeah, but thank you so much. Very generous, man. I really appreciate it. Helps a lot. Aaron Barnes, know you from real life, brother. What's up? Austin, give us your take on the Charlie Kirk psyop. I'll do that after this. But obviously, I don't believe the mainstream story, and anyone that's going around defending the same people that would defend the mainstream JFK story at the time, which is stupid. Even MLK, they literally had to pay out in court because it's all fake, it's all gay, and if you believe the mainstream story about like a major political figure's assassination, you're kind of retarded. Aaron Barnes again, was the real Austin the one who was burned up while trapped inside a Tesla? Yes. Thank you for super chat. Daniel,
if you believe any mainstream story about a political assassination, you're low-key retarded.
Straight up. You need a Fresnel drag diagram? How many? Yeah, like Alan's the Alan's the Fresnel. Alan's the diagram plug.
The young Frezzy right here.
Yeah, he's like he's saying that you're basically like the Fresnel drag diagram drug dealer.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you guys for the super chats. I appreciate it. And shout out to you guys on Kick as well. Anyone on Ko-fi, kofi.com/what's I'll read them off in a sec. Okay. And like I want to make this other point too. So like when you read through, so there's special and general relativity paper, right, where Einstein writes it. He coined it as like the relativity explanation for your mom or whatever. And before he gets into like trying desperately to explain away Michelson-Morley, he's like, but we do know the Earth's in motion based on other measurements, because he has to proceed to say, I've come to the conclusion that the measurement or the motion of the Earth can never be detected by any optical experiment, that the motion of the Earth can never be detected by any terrestrial experiment, et cetera, et cetera. Basically, to explain any and all things, at the least, we have to yield a stationary Earth. And before that, he points out aberration. So like aberration is like the linchpin. Aberration is like if you don't have aberration in your model, like you have nothing. It's like the only thing they can even kind of claim. And this right here actually refutes their claimed cause of aberration, right? Like that's what this does in many different ways. Of course, removing the motion does that, but like even in their own invoked explanation, they're claiming that the aberration doesn't work, right? Like they're throwing the primary cause, the measurement process that they use for the determination of aberration, they're throwing that out to try to explain Airy's failure, right? So it's like they don't have the one thing that even Einstein pointed to kind of try to prop up the heliocentric model. And the last thing I'll say is, for those who don't know, if you're new to the channel, definitely go back and watch some of the stuff that we have, because the true story of what happened was Einstein basically came in to try to show that the Earth was moving, shut down geocentrism, and then he ended up coming full circle back around to even having to present the idea the Earth was moving. He had to yield that it was equally valid to say that it wasn't, and reluctantly so. And this is actually what happened, and he writes about it extensively. So, okay, that was a few gems there.
Yeah, it's pretty funny that he's like, trust us. We know it's moving because of aberration, but then due to my theory that I'm about to introduce, we also don't know for sure that it's moving. It's like, yeah. All right, cool. But yeah, I just wanted to reiterate the philosophical point, like without even getting into any of the math and stuff, like what this theory is supposed to physically represent as it presents the math, is that he's proposing that there's no absolute space, there's no ether frame, like what he talks about when they say like, didn't Einstein disprove the ether and all that? Well, there's talking about two different aspects of ether. One is the mathematical framework of having the motion being relative to it, where you make the speed of light the same by making the the light relative to the medium frame and going through it like that. So he's going to say that that V over C relationship isn't necessary, and like the original interpretation of the Lorentz transformation, where it's about the frequency and wavelength change of the light versus the coordinate system. So he's going to say that that's superfluous, and that's what, and the theory here to be developed will not require any absolutely stationary space provided with special properties, nor will it assign a velocity vector to a point in empty space in which electromagnetic processes take place. So assigning a velocity vector to a point in empty space for electromagnetic propagation would be something like the Sagnac effect, where they have to preserve the distance clockwise and counterclockwise for there to be a change in distance, for there to be a fringe at the other end of it. So he's saying that his theory isn't going to use that anchor point. So like essentially what his theory would predict then is that because there's no absolute reference frame for that distance change to transpire, that the light would propagate such that it completes its clockwise and counterclockwise circuit and produces no fringe. That's actually like what this implies. And then obviously that wasn't what was measured, so they had to like reinterpret what all of this means and how to use the framework to make it compatible with ether physics, while simultaneously denying those ether physics. But yeah, it's all right here in this very straightforward thing right here. Like the difference between what he's putting forward in classical physics is the removal of absolute space, is the removal of definitively knowing that the Earth is in motion, so on and so forth. So.
Yo, no little tidbit here, right? Because I just created like really quickly, just like using Madness or whatever. I created like a satellite tracker over a stationary plane, and then I added a dynamic portion to it, right? And I put 3 separate dynamic causes in there, and one of them is electrodynamics, and I bring that up because like in relational mechanics, so it's like relational electrodynamics. So I have like just the inertial components, blah blah blah. I don't want to get all into that, but the point is, one thing that he does, Andre Assis, in relational mechanics, what he does is he throws out absolute space, and then he throws out space, like 4D space geometry as well, right? He throws them both out, and he says space is just a concept. We don't have to use that. We don't have to invoke that, and that there would be a force akin to gravitation with the physical. I'm obviously not claiming this, right? Like there is an absolute nature to the background, but my point is that the dynamics and the dynamical equations, they work, and what ends up happening, he's basically just saying that distant galaxies rotating around a stationary Earth, physical objects in general, they have a relationship, and it generates the math perfectly matches an electrodynamic force, right? Like the Weber equation of electrodynamics. And so most people don't know that, meaning that like they think, oh, you have absolute space, you have 4D space geometry. Even within the mainstream paradigm, if you actually properly apply the math and then the Machian principle, which was conceded by Einstein himself, space absolute or not, you have to concede the Earth could be stationary, and all of your equations require the same dynamic components of a stationary Earth with a rotating universe. It is inescapable. If you believe in the mainstream media, the mainstream model, it's inescapable that you have to yield the validity and viability of a stationary Earth. It's literally inescapable from all angles. This is taking it a step further and showing you, oh, it's actually inescapable that the Earth is not moving. And I just want to make sure that people are understanding what we're showing them. You know what I'm saying? Like, one thing I think to bring up that you can maybe explain for them, right? To make sure they understand it. Light changes speed, quote unquote, because I have like a bit of a nuanced understanding of light, but inconsequential for intents and purposes. When you put light in water, it changes speed. And if the water's moving, you have to account for the velocity of that medium. And you can predict exactly how long it's going to take the light to get from one point to the other if you know how fast the medium is moving, because you have to add it to the velocity of the medium. And this was tested and proven and done in a lab repeatedly. And that's like the foundation of what then starts this domino effect all the way up to Airy's failure and beyond. And so then if I'm remembering correctly, and you can correct me, when they start to do these relativistic corrections to try to explain Airy's failure, they effectively have to invoke superluminal propagation.
Yeah, so that part of the analysis was dropped because of the rescaling thing. Like what Franco showed was that it does make my interpretation of that was actually incorrect. But the classic emission theory did invoke superluminal thing or superluminal velocities, but currently
Like the
special
math goes
relativity
over
does
the
not.
math goes over c.
Yeah, they multiply the refractive index by c instead of dividing, so it accelerates it by the refractive index essentially.
Gotcha.
But yeah, that was the emission theory. Special relativity does not do that. My previous claim on that was incorrect.
Yeah, it's cool. Whatever. Like, because like the concept does make sense though, right? Because they have to do something. They have to apply the motion somewhere. So, or they have to like hide the motion somewhere, more specifically. And yeah, like what like I don't understand how this goes over people's head. I do get why when you get in the weeds it goes over people's head, but I don't get why the concept goes over people's head. If the light slows down in water, we know that's true. Everyone can go test. That's been tested for a long time. We just know that's how it works. Okay, the starlight's going to slow down, but if the Earth is moving, it's going to keep moving. It doesn't care what the star is doing, bro. It doesn't care if it's going through water or turpentine or mud or ether or whatever. It doesn't care about any of that. It doesn't care what it's doing. The Earth is just moving. And so, like, it's going to keep moving at same speed, and the star's just going to slow down. So if it's slowing down but the Earth keeps moving, it's going to get way out further from underneath it. Not way out, whatever. It's all relative, but and so they have to treat the Earth like it's not moving to explain the result, because, and I would go as far as to say, if they got like any decent measurable deviation, then they could have tried to hold on to the moving Earth and done some type of like relativistic correction maybe, but it doesn't. It just, the only explanation for why the starlight's going to go the same in the water and the same in the air is if the Earth is just not moving. I can't even understand any conceivable hypothetical alternative to that. Like, I don't even need to get all into their maths. Like, it's literally impossible, right? Like, it's physically impossible. If the Earth is actually moving underneath the starlight, it's going to move further underneath the starlight if the starlight goes through water and slows down. It's like physics, right? It's like dynamical physics. It doesn't really matter. I think people just get so caught up in the math, you know what I mean? Like from that side, they think if they can get the equation to say the answer, then the mission accomplished. Pack it up, boys. Let's go home.
Yeah, yeah, it was pretty. It was like a crowning feat, when Lorentz took Fresnel drag and then just applied it to his transformation, and then was like, "Oh, look, we also predict a null," and then that's just what it's been the whole time. But like, so the thing with the water is that it makes you have to pick a preferred frame to even answer it. And the relativists chose our frame. They chose the stationary frame to interpret the results, to make the angle. Because the thing is like, if they're going to say that their interpretation is correct, they have to make the measurement match what's measured in the lab. Right now, now how they get there can be logically bankrupt and all that, but they have to make it match what was in the lab, and they do that, but at the sacrifice of aberration in air, which they would tout as a mutually exclusive proof that the Earth is in motion.
Right, because what most people think when they hear it, right, is they think like, well, they had to treat it like the Earth was stationary. They're like, okay, whatever, because motion is relative. So when you're on the Earth, we treat the Earth like it's stationary for lots of things. No. You're not. That's not how this works, though. You can't pick and choose, right? Like it can't be stationary when the starlight's going through the water, but not when it's not going through water, right? Like you can't have different explanations for different media, right? Like that's the problem that they have that we don't have, because it wouldn't matter what media it is, right? The Earth's just not moving. So it can slow down all it wants to. It could take 5 times as long to get through there, but it's still just going. It's going to end up in the same place because nothing is moving. They can't do that. So they can't use a stationary Earth for both, right? Because then you would get different answers. Like they can't. even with the relativistic math trick, it doesn't work from their paradigm.
Yeah. And a really interesting part of that is, for the geocentric explanation, the starlight already comes in with a horizontal velocity component, consistent with air and consistent with the water. And they have to, throw out the one that they say is proof of the Earth's motion and air to match our position for the water, which is insane.
Right.
They're like,
Because
oh yeah,
that's
we
their whole
predicted.
model.
They're like, we predict the same thing that you do, but ours is more truer. What? How does that? Like that's essentially their argument, right? Like they're not making a mutually exclusive prediction that would like falsify absolute space or the concept of it, or to like show that there was a different, like, hey, we predict as a consequence of relative motion and no absolute space, there's actually a different angle predicted, and this is what we measure. No, they literally have it be the same angle and then try to claim that it's more betterer. That's just philosophy. And then like when you analyze the what they're doing with the absolute space, that's just a special pleading. They're like it's real in this one, but not in this one. What?
Right.
How's that work?
And so just again, I know I'm like doing this over and over, but like reiterating in different ways. So like the starlight has a horizontal velocity component to it. The stationary Earth is going to claim it actually comes in with that, and that's the universe is rotating. So like the universe is moving, the starlight's moving within that. It's coming down to a stationary Earth, so it already has that horizontal velocity component. And then the globe heliocentric model is going to be claiming that the horizontal component is actually coming due to like the relative motion of the Earth moving underneath it. So if they're claiming the reason that the star changes, like right, the angle of the stars, the reason that we even have set angles of the stars, the horizontal velocity component in general, is the Earth is moving through space throughout the year, then that's how they give us the aberration claim that's built for everything. Because obviously that's all built off of air, right? All of that is built off the medium of air, just the typical stellar observations. So you can't have that on the one hand, and then once water's introduced, like have your cake and eat it too, and then treat the Earth like it's stationary to get the right math for the water. You've now refuted the first claim. You've now refuted the primary aberration claim. So like, would you agree with that?
Yeah, they have to fall back on that to say that it's actually all relative. So like the first one for air, they're like Earth motion caused that, and then when they're water, they're like all motion relative.
That's what I'm saying. It's so stupid. It's so stupid. They're like, so there's no way out of this. I've like racked my brain. I can't think of. There is no way out of it. Like I don't think that you can get out of it.
Yeah, like I said, you gotta pick a preferred frame to answer the experiment in, and even the relativists chose the geocentric frame. So, what does that tell you about the superiority and hierarchy of frames, and who's who's the actual way, or which frame actually interprets the experiment correctly?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's just expected to be the same if the Earth's not moving. What should also be very telling, right? It's similar to MMX, honestly. If it's been over a century and they don't have a workable mainstream solution, it's because like one doesn't exist, right? Like if they could come up with one, they would have already come up with one. So yeah. So and then whoa. So like what can you tell them kind of like what the most recent like the mainstream attempted solutions are, so that they understand we're not kind of mischaracterizing them? You've kind of already done that, but just if you can reiterate that maybe.
Yeah, give me 1 second. So yeah, there, real quick, there is a visual bug here. The beam of light comes in already slow before it hits the water in this. It should be the same speed as air before it hits the water, and then it should slow down in here, but it's just a visual bug.
Okay, cool.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. My right now my monitor is on like a different
Gotcha. No
different
worries.
HDMI. I can't see you or anything, but I'm trying to switch over.
Oh, dude, yeah, I had your thing up while you were talking about the satellites. I was hoping you would walk me through how to use it or whatever, because I haven't seen it yet. But
Yeah, just a
I
sec.
pulled it
I'll
up.
show you.
Yeah.
This one.
Are you screen sharing or are you looking at mine?
Oh, I'm just trying to get the monitor to go back.
Oh.
Right now, my monitor is on a different. Like I don't see you at all. Just a sec. I accidentally changed it. All right, here, this one. I'm changing through the. There we go. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So basically, if you see over here to the left, there's like a search function. I don't know if you have the most updated one, because the problem is every time I get an update, there's like a new one. But there should be a search function. Yeah, I think so. And you can type in any satellite that there's publicly available data of, and it should pop up right there. So you can search for them. Once you search one and click on it, it'll actually populate over here on the left on the list. So then this is all live data on the left of all the satellites. If you click it, it's going to show you the overall trajectory. You can go through the time frame, so you can speed it up if you wanted to, like change it from like a 1 minute to an hour to 10 hours, whatever. It'll speed that little blue dot up, which is obviously ISS. So this is just showing you the trajectory mapped out. On the right, we put the rotating universe lab in there with the real inertial forces of like the centrifugal, Euler, and Coriolis forces based on the Machian principle. So yeah, and then if you scroll down a little bit, yeah, that's where you can just change the time frame. If you just keep going, let's see here. So this is where you have like the overlay of the torus field. You see that little off button there? If you click that, yeah, it should make it spin, but it may not be working. I don't know. But really, when you click that, it starts to spin the torus field at the sidereal rates. But anyway, so if you pick a satellite and it's going to show a trajectory, it'll show it within that torus field geometry. And then if you from that angle, it'll show the various altitudes. Because what's very interesting is like they claim some of these satellites change their altitudes immensely, right? Like some of them, like the perigee will go down to something like 600 kilometers, but the apogee will be like 40,000 kilometers, like insane altitude changes. And when you it's just very enlightening to see it visualized over a stationary plane with a rotating universe, because what do you know? The lower altitudes are always coming out on the outer portions and speed up. The speeds are way greater on the outside, which would you expect with the rotating universe towards the outside, centrifugal force is greater, right? And so when you look at like the ISS, same thing. As the ISS gets to the outside, it's elliptical, right? And obviously the south is bigger on a flat Earth. It loops back around way faster. So could that be a coincidence? I guess in theory, but I don't know. I mean, it's pretty interesting. So, yeah, I just thought it would be cool that we could be able to look at the sides and figure it out. If you scroll down a little bit more, yeah, you'll have all the different like dynamic components there. And based on which satellite you pick, it'll show you the relevant or the relative equations or whatever, like the net outputs of the dynamic forces.
That is so awesome.
Yeah, and then if you go a little bit further, further, there's a lot of random stuff. Further, I mean, there's a bunch of stuff there. There's the 3 dynamic components, right? So you have the inertial forces in the left there. So that would just be like Machian principle, stationary Earth, etc. I mean, similar to actually how like Syngenis is the one that brought, I learned that from Syngenis a few years ago. But long story short, in their paradigm, obviously the inertial forces are fictitious, and in a stationary Earth frame, the inertial forces are real. Which of course we know that they are real in reality. Like if you have like a ball attached to a string with a stick and you're spinning it around, everyone knows that ball like wants to go out away from the stick, right? If it wasn't for the string, it would go out away, and that's called centrifugal force. Or like the thing at the fair where the graviton or whatever, you'll get in and it'll throw you up against the wall. Like we all know centrifugal force is real. They claim it's fictitious. If you stop the Earth, rotate the universe, they're just real, pretty simply. And then there's just like dynamic equivalence there. So anyway, that's what the first one is. It's just based on those inertial forces, and you can like move the sliders around, and it'll kind of show you the various relationships. And so like that's basically like messing with the dynamics arbitrarily, right? So I mean, what I don't know. So then if you go to the second one, yeah, that's like showing basically the field flux, which I wouldn't actually lean towards. This is the reason that I've always been hesitant to ever even think about doing something like this, is because like it requires primary presuppositions, and the people normally try to corner you into defending them or whatever. And then on the right is the electrodynamics, right? The relational electrodynamics based on Andre Assis, because again, when he did that and he showed the relativistic like dynamic equivalence, meaning that, just so everyone knows, right? Like obviously, if you have a stationary Earth, everything can move around it, vice versa. In relativity, they admit that there's like a kinematic equivalence, meaning that you could map everything in relation to each other the way that they move. But there's also a dynamic equivalence, which the mainstream, if you Google it, like won't really admit that, but it's just a fact. And Andre C shows that, and he throws out absolute space. He throws out 4D space geometry. He says, no, just the distant galaxies themselves, all the massive universe rotating, that the physical objects would create a force relationship between them as like independent of any type of like assumptions about space. And the equation he uses is an electrodynamic equation, which is very interesting, right? Because obviously I would say electric universe is the only possible route you can go to actually explain what's going on in the sky. So that's pretty interesting. I try to set it up where you can technically you can add your own. I keep changing the channel. You can add your own dynamic inputs. So just to clarify for people here, and I'll drop this link now that I've covered it. Like I'm not claiming any of these things. In fact, I think it's like a combination of these things personally, right? Like I think the biggest trick is they've tricked people into thinking the same reason that things fall down on the Earth is the same reason that the planets move in relation to the sun, and that's the same reason that the galaxies move around, and they just think it's all the same thing. And why would you think that? It's like a totally erroneous assumption. Why? It's not even logical.
Yeah. Well, they came to that conclusion through using Kepler's kinematic ratios, and then Newton was like, "Hey, if we use this as a ratio, we can say that, or like if we use this as another ratio, we can turn it into G and M, which would be like the gravitational potential and the mass of said object to cause it. But because it started with the proportionality of the kinematics of it being based off of just a period, essentially, it doesn't produce any dynamics that have like a mutually exclusive prediction. It's always, spoiler alert, it's always going to match the period of which it's a ratio of.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's a nice trick they did.
And
then they just kind of got high on their own supply and mistook that as confirmation of like a dynamic cause of why they're moving.
Yeah,
and
man.
Because and they made little g is a ratio of big G in the Cavendish thing. And so from that, they just took, like you said, they took the observable 9.8 meters per second squared, applied that to get a value for what big G would be. And then they take big G and divide that by GM, and they isolate M from it. And they're like, oh, look, we now have separated the G and M components from Kepler's kinematics, and now we can like independently determine what the mass of a body is based off of its orbital periods, like whatever the orbiting body is, the mass of the object will be determined out of that ratio. And it's like yeah, that could be true, but you would have to substantiate that or have some way to make a mutually exclusive prediction where G and M aren't used together, and that's never the case. They're always used together in such a way that one of the M's cancels out. So algebraically, their formula, the causal mechanism cancels out, and it becomes just the dominant term of whatever the GM is, and the GM is always proportional to the period, so it's never not the kinematics.
Exactly. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, what's so funny is like almost no one knows that. Like, Newt is propped up as this genius. I mean, honestly, if he created everything that's attributed to him, he was a genius, right? But yeah, like you said, Kepler's the one that mapped out the planetary trajectory, and he just used like the radii, the ratio of the planets and the sun and the earth, and the periodicity of it, just kinematic and it's cyclical. He mapped it out, and then Newton came around and he was like, well, there would have to be a force that would be causing these things to move logically, definitely according to like my mechanical system that I'm introducing. So I'm just going to take his equation, I'm going to throw a dynamic variable in there. And he makes it very clear in his writings. He doesn't know what it is. He's not claiming what it is. He can't even comprehend what it could possibly be. It makes no sense to him. And that if it actually exists, God must be doing it directly. There must be some type of medium. And whether that medium is material or immaterial, he left to the consideration of the readers. And he said that basically, if anyone believes the stuff that people believe now, they're retarded. Right. I mean, and you've heard it, right? Obviously, with the quote being like the idea that innate brute matter would act through the vastness of great distances on other innate brute matter. Is to me so great an absurdity that no man with competent faculty of thinking and philosophical matters could ever fall into it. So he makes it very clear that like, I don't know what this is. So it's like, we can't have beef with Newton, right? He didn't do anything. Like it's like the people misrepresenting him now, right? He was very clear about it. He's not wrong, right? Like what he did was he's like, okay, there is this ratio. The kinematic equation does work. Kepler's right. We can map out the planets. This is cool. And he's like, something's causing them to do that. And so he was just putting forth like, okay, well, here's how you do the math if you want to try to dynamically account for it. I don't know what it is though, right? And that's what's so interesting about his like proposition 43, theorem 22, I think it is, basically the final page of his Principia that wasn't published for some mysterious reason. After he goes through all this writing, he talks about all this stuff to do with gravity. The last thing he leaves the audience with is, but if you had a force akin to gravitation, equal and opposite to gravitation, which would be centrifugal force, right? Which we know we have. He's like, if you had that, then you could just have a stationary Earth at rest in the center of the universe with everything moving around it like Tycho's system, right? So that's the final thing. So like he has to write all this stuff to explain the idea that we're moving, and then he just puts in one page. He's like, of course, we don't have to be moving, right? And they took that out, which is, I mean, that speaks for itself, bro, right? But yeah, so that is kind of, you're right. You nailed it. That's where that first comes from, that conflation, right? Where he talks about this idea of an apple and like local downward acceleration. And then he just attributes that same base principle to the planets. But like my understanding of it, because that's what happens, right? When people come and they want me to give them some replacement, if someone wants to have a back and forth with me where we understand we're in speculation station, I can't go out there. I don't know what that stuff is, but let's try to come up with a more viable dynamic explanation. I'm all for it, right? Like I love that stuff. But that's not typically what people do in these debates. They want to like corner you into some definitive claim that replaces their claim, you know? And it's like, nah, bro, falsification is independent of replacement. But I would say that like the galaxies look like magnetic fields. I think they're probably magnetic. I think the reason they have all these dark matter issues is they're trying to force proportionate mass down the universe's throat, and it just doesn't work. You don't need that if it's magnetic. It doesn't matter how much mass is there. It's just more coherent. It's a stronger magnetic field, whatever. You get it? And that's one thing. That's completely different than the downward electric pressure on the Earth, right? And that's completely different than what's moving the planets around. Like I don't think that they are the same thing. And that's completely different than what's generated by a rotating universe. So like the real answer is probably much more complex, right? And like mankind just has this propensity to like chase the simplest answer and throw their hands up, and they're like cavemen that learned how to do a little algebra or calculus. You know, it's like probably a combination of these factors. If there's a rotating universe, there are real inertial forces. If there's a magnetic field, there's a real flux lines, right? If there's the magnetic component, that's there as well. If there's an ether, there's a real translation of motion of those inertial forces. And on, right? If there's like an initial primary source of energy, then that's going to radiate downward. That's going to ripple through the ether, which will create downward electric pressure. Or like Tesla said, the static electricity would be the ether under strain. These are multiple different variables, you know what I mean? Then you get into like density itself, and then what's the primary causal component of density, blah, blah, blah. It's not as simple as people want to make it, I don't think. And I said all that whole rant there was just to say like, this website is not for those people. Okay. It's for the people that are just interested in trying to kind of figure out what could be going on, seeing, because a lot of people make the claim that the math wouldn't work on a plane. That isn't true. And I'm not sure if you were in there, right? But I was asking them, like, they were disputing this, and I'm like, wait, your own model says that there's a dynamic equivalence, right? And so if this Earth was stationary, there was a giant universe, even if it's much more local, it's still giant, right? If you've ever looked outside, it's crazy at night, right? Like whatever it is pretty vast and big. If it's rotating around us, it's going to generate real inertial forces. People hear Coriolis and think it's like a bad word now, right? But it's not. It's a real effect of physics. They just claim like an apparent fictitious.
Oh, dude, they're gonna get real familiar with Coriolis on the upcoming gyroscope presentation.
Okay, yeah. So I heard something about you looking into pendulums as well.
Yeah, well, a gyro compass is basically a pendulum.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah.
Okay. Gyro compass. Let's go. Okay. Very cool. Yeah. So the Coriolis is a real effect of physics, right? It's just not the same as what they're invoking. But so anyway, if that's all moving around the universe, it would generate these real forces. Why would it not do that if it was rotating around a plane Earth? Like, there's no logical, you can't draw a straight line to that. That doesn't make any sense, right? It would do the same thing. You would just get into what's the motion being translated through, what are the forces being translated through, if there's a medium, how much of it translates through. And that's where you get into like a really tricky place, man, because like you need to know, first of all, how far away everything is. Is there an additional medium? Is there the ether? And then does it act as like a physical medium with a tenuity beyond conception, as Tesla said, but then there's additional fluid mediums? Is there some type of plasma? Are there layers to that? Well, that's all very relevant. How local is the universe? What are the sizes of those things? What are those things? What's the composition of those things? I don't know that stuff, bro. Like, no one's going to ever know that stuff. So any model like this is you're just going to be plugging in random numbers. The real handicap of this site is that I just had it default use like the inputs of the mainstream claims, which we know aren't true, right? So that's the real difficulty, is it's going to start taking like those, the claimed size of the planets, distance of the planets, all that. So you need stronger forces, right? Does that make sense? And then last thing I'll say, if you scroll down all the way to the bottom, all the way, see the bottom right there, there's like a few sources, and if you see Andre Assis, and you don't have to click on it, but if anyone clicks on the Andre Assis portion on the bottom right of where the sources are, it's got a slideshow that shows you like the electrodynamic equations that are used. So, yep, it kind of goes through it pretty well. Yeah, it goes through like the Newtonian component down into the
equations. There's our old friend F equals GMM over R squared, where the second M cancels out, and it's just a ratio of G and M, which is just the Kepler period. And so, real quick to kind of touch on what you're putting forward with a dynamic explanation, the globe lads and the globular enthusiasts, they actually don't know why satellites are moving in the sky, and the reason that they don't know that is because this equation, if you do GMM over R squared for Earth and satellite relationship, well, this satellite mass is going to cancel out, and it's just going to be a ratio of the satellite's period, which is this GM relationship, which comes from Earth. So it's just its relative Earth period is what creates its orbit, which just reduces to Kepler's laws. So nobody actually knows why these satellites are moving. Now they say that they're free falling around the ball, based on these equations, but no one's ever substantiated these equations, Earth's velocity, any component of what actually makes this work. And because it reduces to the kinematics and it's inseparable from it, we actually have no way to actually know why they're moving. So your explanation of like magnetic field dynamics is just as valid as whatever anyone else would ever produce, because as long as the period term is included, which, spoiler alert, it's in the sidereal rate here, the angular turn rate. So it's going to be in the sidereal turn. Like it's already not going to make the incorrect prediction there. So
yeah, and also I have like a NASA source that I found. I went and looked back up the other day, where they try to explain like the idea of the astronauts being weightless on the ISS. They can't use their satellite equations for that. They have to add a Euler force, right? And they have to add centrifugal forces. to the equation as well. So like Newton's equations don't have centrifugal force in it, bro. His entire mechanic system doesn't have it in there. They're fictitious if the Earth is moving, right?
How did they fit a Euler in there? Because that's like a period would have to change if there's a Euler force. That's
they add it. Here,
what?
Yeah. Because this, you know how what they always do. They isolate phenomena that they're trying to explain, and they don't really care about the effects it has on other phenomena. You see what I'm saying? Like
that's the classic, dude.
Yeah, that's what they always do. It's like, oh, look, the math works right here. It's like, yeah, but you just destroyed everything else. No, we're just gonna look at. It's the same thing like when they're like, but it works for the solar system. You know, it's like, all right, bro, you got that, but yeah. Cool.
And on your point real quick about spinning galaxies, which you brought up earlier, and them needing dark energy and dark matter. Yeah, that's because they took these ratios and attributed mass to the celestial bodies. And then, after they got real comfortable with that, they were like, ooh, you know what? I bet you I can tell you how much the star weighs based on its flicker rate, stuff like that. And so like with their whole noble ladder situation where they, they're like, we confirmed these distances. So now based off of this premise, we're going to confirm this distance, as we go further and further outward. And so they ended up in the scenario, which you've talked about before, where the galaxies were spinning too fast and they would have ripped themselves apart based on their mass, which is derived based off of their brightness, based off of their interpretation of the noble ladder being super correct. And so to facilitate correctness, they just introduced how much mass would there have to be to make it not fall apart. And that's how much dark matter there is. Or, I'm sorry, that's how much dark energy there is. And it's like, okay, that's cool. I guess you can like, if we had the freedom to do that and like it wasn't like challenged or whatever, then like we would have just as valid explanations that are just as physically meaningless. But we don't take that approach. We're always like, we don't know, about the heavens and like what can be asserted for certain, because all anyone's ever done is used a ratio of the period and pi to create concentric circles outward. Like even the astronomical unit that you get out of that is a dimensionless ratio. It's not until they add Earth's radius using central angle theorem when another celestial object is aligned to the sun to draw a triangle where they could say this much of the distance is Earth's radius, so then they can proportionally solve out what the length of that triangle would be to get the astronomical unit. Like it's all ratio based, internal, consistent, based off of periods. It's like the distance that you get out of it doesn't even have to be physically meaningful. It's just a ratio of the period in reference to another ratio to turn it into meters.
Yeah, exactly. This was the other idea I had too, which is like to build this out to where you can have a slider, and as you move it, it brings it everything in more local, and it just changes all the variables in relation to that. Because that's all you would do, right? Like there is literally no physical limitation to making the universe much smaller, much more local, finite, much more dense. There's literally no limitation. It's just all ratio based. And so the tricky part is it's like you're still you're just putting, you're putting inputs that we can't verify. And it's like there needs to be a major disclaimer. Like maybe we make it a pop-up window that's like, hey, models aren't reality. Models aren't real. I don't know.
Oh, dude, are you talking about a conceptual model disclaimer? I got you, dog.
Yay.
Conceptual model. No, wait. But what about the globe? Oh, look, it's the same conceptual model. The guys, they use the same dome of vision to project the limit of where you see the object at so that it follows the quote 60 nautical mile per degree relationship. They're never not conceptual models. And to kind of illustrate that, like you were saying about the distances and whatnot, one of my favorite things about the FE conceptual model sim here is if we put it in globe projection and we go to the center of the globe, right? And we set what this does is this sets the altitude, like the physical altitude of the stars would be 6,731 kilometers, and you would see exactly no difference between this and they're like, oh, these stars are actually trillions of light years away and whatnot. To make any of this work as the two sphere conceptual model works, to even make it work, you treat everything as if it's 6,731 meters away from you, and that makes a concentric shell around you. So it's like the greater celestial sphere that they think that that exist would be. Where's my true position? Oops, can't remember the buttons. It's been a while since I've operated it. Give me a second. True positions.
This is fire.
Yeah, here we go. Yeah, so the celestial shell that they like, the celestial sphere that they have, and then the terrestrial sphere, right? These are two models that are linked together by essentially setting no matter how far away these really are in reality or whatever, they set them to a conceptual altitude here to make this work with the 60 nautical miles per degree. And right. So that there's no difference between this and saying, hey, let's change back to, there's no difference between that and saying, there's a disk of stars above us that's a flat plane, and we perceive in a sphere with a limit of vision, and as it's projected into our hemisphere of vision and we walk around the flat earth, we see these, we see this, how the stars will change position as we move around.
Yeah, that's cool. Because I do think we should obviously we should just work together, right? I mean, like I thought about that yesterday. I'm like, well, EtherCause has already made like a dope model, multiple different like visualizations and stuff, where people do seem to need that, right? Not even to necessarily believe it, but they need visualizations. They need to see the viability of something visually. And when I thought back, it's like, well, to be fair, when I first heard the idea of flat Earth, I'm like, that's retarded. What does that even mean? And I needed to see kind of like what it meant. You know what I mean? Like it's reasonable as long as people understand it's not reality, and then really elucidating the fact that even the globe has that same intrinsic limitation. Hopefully people then get a grasp of it. So like a good enough grasp of it that they just kind of deter away from the internalization of models altogether. That's what flat Earth actually is basically saying, like, okay, look, we don't know and models aren't reality. Let's just go back to reality and see what the evidence says.
Yeah, the Globe Lads mistake internal consistency with in pragmatism with it being physically meaningful and stuff. It's like they make no distinction between how this system of the globe works versus where they think the sun is at 93 million miles away. Like nobody ever sees this. That we only ever see what's in this hemisphere of vision, like for the observer. And even on this globe projection from whatever website this was, where they made like the same thing that I made, or the same thing that I made and Bislin made and Shane and all that. It's all a conceptual model based off of a fictitious observer at the center here. This is what moving the observer here and referencing where the stars should be versus where the apparent position is observed is what makes this system work. And that's all it is. It's just you have to reference this fictitious person here the same way that even on flat Earth, ours would just be at the North Pole center, right? We would do all of our distances and elevations and everything based off of that relationship, off of that point. It works just as well as any other projection. It's just two hemispheres merged together for what a single observer would see. So if you go into first person mode and you look what you see, well, let me change into globe mode and let's see what changes. Nothing, not a single thing. Oh, look, dual pole mode, same map projection. Nothing changes. Although that did go upside down. That's not, that definitely shouldn't happen for the other modes. But anyway, nothing changes.
Yeah, I see a lot of people just tap out there. They tap out at projections for whatever reason, whatever mental block is there.
I think it's just there's a lot of rhetoric of like what goes on in the sky doesn't prove a flat Earth, and it's like, yeah, just based off observation alone, that's definitely true. but in terms of like navigation and like how did the geocentric flat Earth Chinese people navigate back in the day? They used the celestial sphere model. That's the exact same of what I'm showing here, where the observer has a hemisphere of vision. Like no one's ever done a different system than this. It's just that the Europeans got together and was like, "Hey, this is the two sphere system, and when we merge these two together, ball."
Right.
It's the same system as the other, as what everyone was already using. So they just they just took control of the narrative and presented it as if it was, it always has been, right? We've always known it's a globe. The Greeks figured it out or whatever.
Yeah. And this is why you got to be able to look at like the preponderance of evidence, the empirical evidence, the verifiable evidence, and that's actually what determines the true baseline. And then conceptually building out like models from there is just that, right? Like that's what people don't get. People are like, "Oh, are you a glober? Why would I be a glober? What has occurred that would make me suddenly not understand that we falsified the globe? Like, what?" It's so weird, and it's like, I get it's because they don't understand. They don't understand what falsified the globe, and it's like the baseline is that it's a stationary plane. The evidence shows that, but whatever. People clearly they want their models right. What the other interesting part, right, is when you like brought up dark energy. Like if you just look at the preponderance of evidence, how is our model not better? We don't need dark energy. Like dark energy is because all the celestial observations show the Earth in the center and not moving. So if we believe it is moving and not in the center, we had to come up with some story about why it looks that way. So we said that every point of space is accelerating, expanding away from each other, and it makes it look like we're in the center even though we're actually not. But if that's happening, the whole entire universe is accelerating, expanding, then there has to be some type of energy doing that. We can't find it. We can't detect it. We can't define it. It's not where it's supposed to be. When we look at the energy that's in a vacuum on the Earth, it doesn't match it. It's off by an insane amount, right? Magnitudes and magnitudes. So it's like, well, we're just going to put the placeholder in there and call it dark energy. And it's like they're God, basically. It's this ever-present force that's causing everything to be where it's at. And it's basically creating the universe that we see, but we can't find it, can't understand it, can't define it, can't see it. We don't need that, though. We don't need dark energy at all. And we also don't need dark matter at all, right? So how is that model not better? Like, so if you guys want to do the whole let's argue and battle over models, ours is better. We don't need the crazy fairy tales that the mainstream heliocentric model needs. So it's like, that's what I hope. I hope that the audience, I leave the audience with, because there's probably some new people in here based on some of the interactions on X and stuff like that. That's really what you need to do. You need to look at the totality of the evidence. And what you're going to find out is the geocentric model consistently matches predictions. And when we do a specific test, an empirical test, a measurement, highly precise measurements, further observations, whatever, it matches that. It matches the stationary Earth. It never matches the idea the Earth is moving. And then what they do every single time, bro, is they just revise the heliocentric model, the moving Earth model, to imitate the stationary Earth model, to be exactly the same as the stationary Earth model. And then they say, okay, now the moving Earth model works again. That's literally what has happened every time,
Yeah. And to your point, the only reason they got in this predicament of needing, what do you call it, like a free input for dark matter and dark energy, is because they tried to assert dynamics when when the only thing that's ever existed is a ratio of kinematics of period and pi, which doesn't tell you anything about why anything moves, but they need to, in order to get you to materialize the heavens, right? They need you to this planet weighs this much. That must mean it has a core and it's got a crust, and its crust is made of gas. Actually, it's actually compressed gas. It's so compressed it's like liquid like just mind-blowing things that have no physical meaning, all based off of a period and pi.
Yeah, that's such a trip.
It's crazy to think about, like how they, like where they took it, and then instances where it was wrong, and instead of admitting that, they're just like, no, but it's still rocks and balls of gas and stuff up there.
That's super far away and everything's empty, and yeah, it's so weird. It's almost like a really culty, weird religion. But
Yeah, I wanted to read a quote real quick before we wrap up about modern cosmology. Um, quick here, let's see. Okay, so this is a quote from Robinson in 1996 on cosmology, right? So this is like a quote from a professor, right? And he says, "It is evident that in the post-Copernican era of human history, no well-informed and rational person can imagine the Earth can imagine that the Earth occupies a unique position in the universe." And basically, they're saying that if you question their cosmology, you're you're basically a retard.
yeah, I read this yesterday. I read this yesterday. I'd never seen that one.
It's just it's one of the most it's right there on the wiki when you Google or when you like look up um, the Copernican principle and cosmological principle and stuff. This is the this is like they can't prove it, right? Because they're all relativist. But if you question it, you're a dummy. You're wrong.
Yeah, it's so weird. It's so weird. Like as if it's asserted with enough confidence it becomes true or whatever, you know. Back out of here. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is weird. Cool, man. I've realized that for me, kind of the progression of it of significance, right? Like the Earth not moving was actually the primary thing for me, right? That's what changed everything for me. That's what made me understand this is super important. You get questions like, why does it even matter? Why are you investing this much time into it? Da, 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 why would they lie? Blah blah blah. And I don't actually attribute malevolence to most of these like math magicians in their little robes or whatever. You know, like they're just weirdos and they probably like don't want there to be a god or whatever. I don't know, but they just try to figure out how to explain their worldview. They're not like it's not like a big concerted conspiracy every time. The players lower down just do the work for them. But my point is like, yeah, I think that you have to face the geocentrism part of it first. And I think that we give a lot of people these outs where we get into shape so quickly, right, that they just deflect to that. And it's like, no, 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 no. So like people can spiral if they want to, especially after Antarctica, but like I'm gonna really like represent the fact the Earth's not moving and go in depth. I think it's incredibly significant, and then we can get into shape. So yeah, that's why I wanted to bring you on and talk about this because I don't know what if you had to like rank them, right? Like for me, bro, like Airy's failure, I think is the most damning for them.
Yeah, Aries and Mickelson.
Yeah,
So Aries would have been trying to substantiate a first order relationship, and Mickelson was trying to look for a second order drag effect. And when they got neither, like that's a wrap. Like there's no like third order. Can we get can we get a fourth order? Like no, that's it. You're all out of velocity terms. And so yeah, with those two, like that's pretty much a wrap.
yeah, yeah. Because I've always just said it was MMX, but once you guys started diving into Airy's failure more, because like Bob was obsessed with Airy's failure, and I realized, like, oh wait, because like the first order is significant. Like the fact that it's a first order measurement is significant, right? And like with
Super
it,
significant.
yeah,
It's their biggest. Like if that measurement actually prove their model, like it would be the most significant proof that there would be. If they didn't have the issue with the water, like it would be really hard to argue against because it does give the ratio. And I can, it's outside of the scope of this presentation, but there's even room for how they cooked in the AU and the speed of light as a ratio of that angle to make it fit in the first place. There's an argument to be made there. But even granting them just the angle relationship on its own, it's like, oh, that is a pretty significant thing because it's directly proportional. It's the proportionality is 1 to 1 essentially.
right. Like yeah, like yeah, I just don't even know where you go from there if they don't have aberration. if the cause of aberration is not their explanation, they don't really have anything. Like they literally don't. Einstein would
they don't have
agree.
anything better.
Yeah. So I think people should definitely familiarize yourself with it. And then what I'll do is I'll go back, I'll edit the description. I'll make sure I drop all the links to the presentation, the Google Sheets. It has the sources. You go to the, obviously go to the bottom and it'll have it separated. It has sources, all that has all the math. They basically have citations in there for you because they actually clipped out the actual specific parts of it. So it's effectively citations. You can download the actual sources yourself, check all the math, all that, and also all of Alan's presentations. He also has multiple presentations on his channel akin to this, where they go through it. They talk to different people, different physicists, stuff like that. So I definitely encourage people to like look through it, familiarize yourself with it, because it's like inescapable. And once you see it, you kind of can't unsee it. And yeah, the reason I think it's maybe more important is like MMX in theory, like in theory, they came out with a mathematical solution. Even though it's complete nonsense, like they did, but they can't even do that with Airy's failure. So it's like even worse. You know what I mean? So, yeah. But do you have any closing remarks or want to tell people where to go, stuff like that?
Yeah. So my channel on YouTube is space_audits, and every Tuesday we do a research and reading night and/or presentations on Ether Cause. And then on Fridays we do Twitter community space, and usually that's streamed, but if not, it's just on Twitter. So if you're not on Twitter following us, you might not know about it or whatever. But if you have a Twitter account, follow at space_audits, and then every Friday we go over there and see what the lads are up to on the Twitter space.
Nice.
Oh, and then Sunday, Glowbusters will be returning. Let's see, I think in September, like the second week of September or something like that. I haven't got a definitive date yet, but we'll be returning on in September.
Okay, very cool, very cool. And yeah, well, I think we should we'll obviously be hanging out and talking more now that I'm coming back on. So yeah, man, it should be good times. Looking forward, man. Well, thank you for doing this. Sorry about last night. Kind of.
Oh, no worries, dude. Internet's the worst, and if it's not right, there's no point in going live.
Yeah, exactly. I was just gonna look like a Minecraft character or something. Cool, brother. Well, thank you so much, man. We'll definitely stay in touch. Go show Alan some love, and go support him and the people at Ether Cause too, because that kind of like motivates them and helps make it possible. They're investing tons of time and energy into doing this stuff. So I definitely encourage any supporters of mine to go show them some love and support them.
Thank you, sir.
Cool. Yeah, bro. I'll catch up with you soon, brother.
Yep. See you later. We're actually going to go play Codenames on Discord. So if anyone wants to play Codenames or get introduced to the community, so on and so forth, we're about to go play a community game together on Discord. So check it out there. That's discord.gg/ethercosmology. And if Shalom's listening, he'll put a link in the chat. Thank you, sir.
Nice. Much love, brother. And trolls are going to get decimated. You go in there, so don't even waste your time.
Right. Yeah, we aggressively ban, so good luck. All right, later, lads.
Much love, man. Cool, very cool, man. Shout out to Alan for doing that. A couple super chats here. Daniel, go back and crush all of Schooling Glubbers. I've been listening to Witsit, Alan, Shane, Biaskely, Stone, etc. all for years. These guys are the goats. Thank you, man. Much love. Yeah, Ether Cause is dope. How does light behave on flat? Much love, fam. Inconsequential as to shape, but light's the most, perplexing, confounding phenomena in all of physics, and that's pretty universally agreed upon. But I would say light is nothing more than a perturbation within the background medium, and actually is the background medium. The localized excitation creates illumination. We have visible light, non-visible light. The non-visible light's everywhere. So specifically, how does visible light behave? Right. Most people don't even realize that light is everywhere. Visible light's a small little portion of it, but it's like a pond. You throw a rock in there, it ripples. It's like an earthquake hits the pond. It just vibrates, it oscillates, it perturbates, and that disturbance causes the light or the medium to light up. There's a rate of induction. I won't go too much into it, but like you can't have the waving phenomena without a medium, because waving is the medium moving. And if you look at more of the older ideas of it, obviously it's that light travels as a wave through the medium. That is not my personal understanding. My understanding is that the light is the medium waving or perturbing, right? And the perturbation of it causes the illumination. The rate of illumination is the rate of adduction. People call that the speed of light. And so it has a speed as in a rate, but it doesn't have a speed as in travel from point A to point B. So pretty simple. There is no separation of the medium and the light. There is no duality of light. There is no particle wave duality. There is no individualized wave of light traveling through a medium. A wave is the medium. You know, I can't not hand you a wave. I can wave my hand. It's a type of motion. So in order to have a wave, you have to have a medium. You can't have a wave in the ocean without the ocean, because the wave is the ocean moving. You can't wave your towel, wave your bed sheet, wave anything without the actual medium, because it is just the medium that's moving. It's not an individualized thing on its own. This kind of immediately solves all of the issues with light in all of physics, including the double slit, including quantum eraser, all of these things. A proper understanding of the fundamental nature of quantum, where it's actually all ether modalities, and the fundamental nature of light immediately solves everything. And you can still even maintain majority of the modern conceptions. That was quite a bit. That's a very huge question, but there you go. Flatman B, space was made in a satanic retarded basement. Yeah. Thank you for the super chat. Thank you for support. Shout out to the people that subbed up on Kick. Much love to you guys. Obviously, like, if you guys remember, when I came back, I'm like, oh, let's prioritize Kick so I can meet the different metrics so that I can actually become verified on there. I won't use this stream to explain everything. I'll stream again tomorrow night and we'll explain everything. I don't really blame people for just being like, whenever Austin says that doesn't mean anything, because I keep saying that and then disappearing for like long periods of time. But what I will say is, like, never once have I said I was coming back and then like not actually believed that to be true. Things outside of my control happen that have to be prioritized. It is what it is. But there's no reason for me to step away at this point. I got the internet fully set up. I got everything set up. We should be super good to go from here forward. So we'll be streaming consistently. Kick is the most reliable when it comes to free speech. So subbing up and showing love on Kick is still helps me out a lot and help us get verified. So shout out to you guys. Games by Grand. Shout out to Frank Nitty, currently the top amount of subs. Thank you for gifting subs, Frank, and Games by Grand. Shout out to you guys. Much love. Follow on Kick, because that's where we're going to go. If there's ever anything controversial, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to keep up I'm just going to keep the streams running on YouTube as well, because Kick kind of limits them and they fall off after a few weeks or whatever. So there's kind of the update on that. Cool. So the summary here, it's very simple. There's no reason to get too complicated, although like digging in the weeds is very beneficial, because there's always these people that come and they rely on your ignorance, your lack of understanding, to trick you into thinking that like Alan's wrong or that we're wrong about this and we just don't understand it. And trust me, there's an explanation. There isn't one. And don't fall for that trick. It's a super cheap trick. So, Alan went all the way and found their best explanations at the top levels and showed how it doesn't work. They actually have to just invoke a stationary Earth to even get the right math. That should tell you all you need to know. They can't just invoke a stationary Earth because it's relative to reference frame, because again, it wouldn't work for the telescope that has air and the telescope that has water, right? You can't get the same results by picking and choosing that just in the water you have a stationary Earth. You can't do that. You can't pick and choose when you have motion, but claim motion's always there. You can't have a moving stationary Earth. That's retarded. So there you go. And again, the analogy is pretty simple, right? Like if I'm standing outside, like it's raining right now, if I go outside, the rain's just going to be coming down. If I start jogging through the rain, it's going to look like it's coming in at an angle. The rain didn't do anything different, though. It just kept falling straight down. I just started moving underneath the rain. So as I move underneath the rain, it comes in at an angle. If I started sprinting instead of jogging, then the angle's going to get steeper, right? Pretty simple. The telescope attached to the Earth would be moving underneath the rain, underneath the starlight. It would come in at an angle. That's what they claim is the cause of the starlight coming in at an angle, and they call that aberration, stellar aberration. It changes throughout the year. We're supposedly revolving around the sun in space. That is a primary claim of the heliocentric model. If you ask for proofs of the heliocentric model, that's really the only one they can even kind of claim is some type of evidence of motion or first order evidence, and it doesn't actually work because of this and many other things. But this is a falsification of the only thing they could even kind of claim happens because we're moving through space. So pretty significant. You put water in the telescope, it would slow down, the angle would change, it would become more steep because the Earth's moved further underneath it. It doesn't do that. It just does the same thing that it does in the air, and that's because the Earth isn't moving, the telescope isn't moving. We're just looking at a sky that's moving. Pretty simple. None of it's complicated. The only part that becomes complicated is when you have to do the mental gymnastics required to basically claim contradictory things are simultaneously true. And trust me, though, all of your senses, all of your logic, all of your interpretation, all of the empirical evidence, and just trust this little creepy grabbler that wanted to have sex with his wife's daughter that he used to beat, and he treated her like she was some type of robot and then called Japanese people dogs or whatever. While he was cross-dressing in hills, forgot to wear clothes, and was legitimately retarded, didn't do any of his own math, didn't do any of his own theory, and went completely insane before he died. So there's that. And if you were wondering, yes, he is. And it does seem to be every time. And if you're noticing, you're racist. All right. Cool. I love you guys, man. I'm going to get out of here. We are back to stay. Don't blame you for not necessarily thinking that's true, but you will see. Pretty big debate I just agreed to. 10v1, but I'll be on the 10. I think I might be on a few of them. So that'll be cool if you've seen like the Jubilees debates and stuff like that. Another big debate that I got to finalize the specifics of. Once I get final confirmation, I'll announce them. I'll put them on like a calendar that's publicly available and stuff like that. But coming back debating, quite a few, like big debates. So should be pretty interesting. I'll give you guys an update kind of on the whole Antarctica thing, the documentary of Antarctica thing. Am I going to be in it, etc. We'll talk about that probably tomorrow. So I'll give you guys a general update. I want to keep this kind of specific to the topic so people watch it back. Replay value isn't just about a bunch of other things. Also, I'm going to kind of repackage my geocentrism presentation. I think I did that like 3 years ago now. And I'm going to repackage it and do it again for like a kind of higher quality, more modern, up-to-date presentation where I'm just going to show you guys. It's going to be kind of like a bird box film, we'll call it, where, they just like forcibly held your eyes open, and I'll create it in such a way that you can basically send it to people that and, they have to close their eyes and run away, or there's really no escaping it. And it'll probably change the way that they view reality forever once they find out that all of mainstream academia, all of these supposedly really smart, really bright physicists that gave us this model and supposedly proved it, when you actually go listen to what they said, oh, we didn't actually prove anything. The Earth could be stationary and at rest. All evidence seems to suggest that. It explains everything, and many times even better, but we just don't like the idea that we're special or unique. We have a philosophical bias, and we use philosophical criteria to determine our models. And of course, that's not science. We've been talking about this for years on this channel, if you're not new, but of course, I stepped away for a bit. I think it's important to keep making this point because it changes everything. And there's definitely a concerted effort to lie to you about the nature of where you live. So I know a lot of people want me to cover stuff like the Charlie Kirk thing, the situation with Iran, just a lot of different conspiracies, a lot of different things about history, a lot of things about the scriptures, a lot of things about ancient civilizations. I will cover all of these things, but I am not going to stop talking about the main thing that cost me to create content in the first place, which is that this Earth is stationary and in the center of everything. It's a special, unique position, and specifically a stationary topographical plane. So there you go. There's kind of the update. So shout out to Alan again. Much love to them. Shout out to everyone at EtherCause. I'll probably just try to integrate kind of like the satellite tracker into some of the models that they have, and maybe change, figure out the best URL, or see what URLs they use, and we'll just kind of go from there. And we'll build out different conceptualizations and models for different phenomena. I think a big step of it is showing the dynamic viability of a stationary Earth with a rotating universe. So there you go. So much things for you to cover, Austin. So much great to spill. Yeah, there's a lot going on, but I'll start covering everything for sure. I won't even start talking about the topics right now, though, because I'll start ranting. What up, Sacred? Shout out to everyone that's watching on Kick, by the way. So geocentrism is more about scripture than scientific verification. When did I say that? What? First of all, like, you got to understand what science actually is. But no, it's nothing. It's not about scripture. What? It's like, if the earth is moving, it just has philosophical implications, right? I mean, that's why the topic is significant. It's not easily dismissed as some like inconsequential, nerdy topic of physics or something. That's not what this is. This is like arguably one of the biggest components to like understanding cosmology, which is how everything works, or what everything is, or where everything is, right? That there is. So, nah, it's not like some spiritual religious bias that I have. That would be extremely lame if that were true, but unfortunately for you, it is not. Hence why we just completely destroyed the mainstream model and no one invoked a Bible verse. All right. Much love, guys. Seek and speak truth unequivocally. The weak find contentment in the consensus of ignorance. As long as everyone else thinks it, then it must be true. Or who cares if it's true? As long as I can be the cool kid. Rarely are those people the cool kids, though, ironically. Gotta catch the replay. Yeah. All right. Yeah, much love. What's true is really popular. What's popular is rarely true. I'll catch up with you guys tomorrow night. It looks like 9 p.m. Eastern will be the typical time. Maybe we'll bump it up an hour, but I think probably 9 p.m. Eastern at 6 p.m. Pacific. I'll keep having dope guests on. We got some big debates coming up. I'll announce them once they're finalized. There'll be a calendar. You can just go check and keep it up to date there. But so, I mean, realistically, I've kind of known this for a while, but what'll happen is once I like kind of eat some of these people up and they get diced up, it'll kind of ripple out, and then other people will want to challenge me. And for those who keep asking for whatever reason, yes, in all of these situations, on all of these platforms, and all these interviews, and all these podcast appearances, and all of these debates, I am still a flat earther. And if that triggers you, I don't care. And I will represent myself as such. All right. Love you guys. Catch up with you on the flip side. Peace.